Welcome to Casa de Habana, Monroe Street, Toledo, Ohio. We want to thank them for allowing us to host tonight from these great confines, a great cigar bar, one of my favorites. If I'm allowed to say that. I'm allowed to say that?
This isn't our old days when we did the radio show and you weren't allowed to quantify, qualify, or
Yes. Now we can just,
I can say whatever.
who knows? We broke that rule all the time. So I guess it's just the same.
Murphy would get so mad at us.
You can't say that. You can't say it's the best anything. You can't. But now we can say it. The cigars are great. The company is awesome. It's a great place.
So for those of you who don't know, Tom and I, for a couple of years, did a radio call-in talk show for the high school, MUZ Bedford Mule radio station. And because it was a school radio station,
Bedford Public Radio.
Yeah, public radio, we usually have commercials, so you weren't allowed to say anything was the best or that it was the
Goodest.
or yeah, or you weren't allowed to quantify, qualify, or I don't remember what third Q was. So,
but you could say that we got food from a certain place.
Yeah.
We just couldn't say that it was any good.
well, that's how we got food from certain places.
Yes.
Hagel Brothers used to bring us over food. In fact, we did a couple of shows from their lobby,
Yes.
which just made the whole thing fun. But free food is always good.
I like the free food.
So
That was enough for me. You didn't have to
we
pay
didn't
us.
get paid for it.
No, we didn't. We got paid in bagels.
Pretty sure that was our pay.
I gained 20 pounds doing that little show, but it was well worth it.
And we had two people that would call in.
I was about to say our demographic was people we knew
Yeah.
that would actually make an effort to try to find us.
So it would make fun.
Move it to the table.
Oh. This?
Yes. Move it to the table. Sorry, that's our producer, Kevin, instructing us to move things around. So we've taken on a couple tough topics over the course of the last couple of weeks. We took on immigration in Minneapolis. That was a fun one. We got a lot of views on that one. A lot of people listened and a lot of people commented. Those were fun to read. We do read all those, by the way. I did.
I don't.
That was smart.
Go ahead and make all the comments about me that you want to.
But everybody was ripping me. I talked about the strength of immigration being the bedrock of our society. And early in the podcast, I talked about the fact that I was referring to legal immigration, but later I didn't think it was necessary. Apparently it was, because I got called many of fun names, but I'm not going to read all of them anymore, at least not the negative ones. I'll ignore those. I'll just go for the positive ones. But then second, really into it type of podcast we had, we took on the Somali fraud going on. I thought that was a very interesting one. And tonight, I'd like to talk about the changing globalism that has really governed trade in the world over the course of, let's say, the last 79 years. Ever since the end of World War II, there was this little conference called Bretton Woods, where the United States invited all of its allies in World War II to come to Connecticut. And there we sat down and went through what the world would look like when World War II ended. And in the history of mankind, where most countries, when they would win a war, the way the United States wound up as a true victor in World War II, because we were the economy left standing, and our economy was so robust, it put shame to most of the rest of the world combined. We also had the strongest Navy the world had ever seen, and we kind of took on the role as the United States being the world policeman. And we kind of set what the order of world trade would look like. We would open up our markets to everyone. We would keep our tariffs low, and we would allow people to ship into the great United States economy that was absolutely clicking at that point. The U.S. made an almost seamless transition from wartime production to peacetime production, and it was good for everybody. It was a very good thing. It was set up to be something that wasn't going to last forever. It was really for the fight against the Soviets, against the Soviet Union, and the communist regime there that wanted to instill itself as the premier global power, and we set things up to stop that. And globalism kind of became the way that we went about doing that. And we figured anybody that would trade with us, anybody that we could bring into our sphere would wind up becoming more Western. And I think it was a good system, and it certainly worked. You saw what the global economy could do. It basically brought the Russian economy to its knees, which came to a kind of a crescendo during the Reagan administration when the Berlin Wall came down and everybody united, and it wound up being a big victory. The U.S. was not always going to be able to be the end of every trade negotiation and allow everybody to have tariffs against our goods. We had shipped over much of our manufacturing to foreign countries, primarily China, which then became the world's manufacturer and gave China a tremendous amount of power, influence, and money. And then they really became an adversary. And so now you look at it, why did the US win World War II? Well, we out manufactured everybody else. While the Japanese were able to produce one or two carriers, we were able to produce, 13, 14 carriers in a year. When you look at the amount of ships that we built during that time and tanks and planes, it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Now we don't produce stuff like that anymore. We've shipped a lot of that over. We don't produce a lot of our steel. We don't produce a lot of ships, not enough. And that's why I think it got to the point where eventually this thing had to run its course. And I think that's where the world is now. And something happened that was very monumental this week, and that is Marco Rubio had a speech in Europe this week as we convened a lot of the Western powers there, the European Union, and Rubio was able to speak to those great European powers. The English, the Dutch, the Germans, the French. And last year, we had Vice President J.D. Vance do a similar speech, and it was derided. This week, when Marco Rubio had his speech, he got a standing ovation. And I think that shows Marco Rubio is a much more seasoned professional politician. He's a great orator, and he's very good about getting consensus together. And when you looked at his speech, it did have a different tone to it. And it was more about, hey, Europe, you are a great power. You as a combined unit, you can do things. You can start becoming a great military power again. You can be a power in this world. We want you to. We're going to go and do this. We want you to come along with us. Come, do this with us. Control immigration. Control, what you're spending in military spending. Become that great power that you have basically seeded all these years, and join us in this new endeavor. And we're going to change things. And I think that's where the world stands. And it's kind of an interesting time, because how does Europe respond? Do they go out and are they angry at the U.S. for changing things? And do they align more with China and with Africa and with all these other regions and all these other powers to basically try to replace the U.S.'s influence? Or do they partner with the United States up to the betterment of all? And that's kind of where things sit. And Mike, I'd like to hear your thoughts on kind of some of these changes and what the world may look like moving forward, because I think it's going to change.
I think the first question that comes to mind is going back to the end of World War II and the great success the United States enjoyed. How much of that was tied to the fact that we had just spent those years at war? War was kind of driving the machine. It gave us not only the ability to manufacture, but it kind of gave us purpose in what we were doing. It was something we could rally and get behind. Of late, we've not been at war. We've not been engaged in any major conflict. So we're left to kind of our own devices and our own economy, and how does everything affect us personally. So I think, we're kind of in a different landscape right now than what we were at that time. So if there's change coming, I think it has more to do with the fact that we're not at war actively. And so it changes how we view our own economy, how our people view our own people, borders, we've made our borders the enemy of our economy, and I think we need to be careful with how that takes shape moving forward. I don't think you can take. I think the world is too big of a stage, and our part in it. I think because we are a power. We said before we got started, when you and I were chatting about, with great power and authority comes great responsibility, and I think the United States is responsible for more than what some of these other countries are, just given our stance in the world order. I think where we are, we have to be more careful. We have to be more mindful of how what we do affects not just the countries that we bordered, but every country.
So when you look at that, I mean,
that's why when something like threatening to pull back out of the UN, I think that's why that causes such instability in the world, is that, our part in that has been sort of the control rod in the nuclear reactor. Our part in that brought stability just by the nature of who we were and how we did things. And when you shape that, or when you pull those control rods out, the reaction is greater, the heat is greater. I think you could end up developing your own problems that you then have to solve.
Now, Mike is an electrician, and I think that's a great analogy that you're putting together there. The control rods. You think about what rods do to keep a nuclear power reactor from, you know,
It keeps control.
yeah, yeah. It's a great analogy. I don't think the U.S. is looking to completely pull away from the world. I think you see we are a very active participant. When you see what happened with Venezuela and taking out Maduro, who was a very hardcore dictator and had, basically set that country up to fail. And here's a country with vast natural resources, a tremendous populace with good demographics. And this is a country that should be the jewel of South America. It should be an absolute powerhouse economically, and it was before it became a communist country, before all the oil profits and stuff like that went into the pockets of a few. That country was doing extremely well. And now you have Maduro who goes in there and puts down, an iron fist, and that country was absolutely fading in power. And you had food shortages, and you had all kinds of issues, poor healthcare, poor education, all of it right down the line. When you look at the reaction of the Venezuelan people, both living in Venezuela and those that had escaped, and I'll use that term because they escaped communism over there to move elsewhere, including the United States. Those people were thrilled with the fact that the U.S. went in there and took him out. And I think that shows you, I really believe we did the right thing. I think by taking him out, you can bring stability back to the country, and we'll help foster that through. Now, you can say we did that for oil, but at the end, I think it's going to be a huge gain for the Venezuelan people. They will be the true victors of that. Combine that with what we've done with Iran, putting our foot down with their nuclear program. A nuclear armed Iran is probably the biggest instability in the world today. And, we've had a number of presidents that have tried to curtail what they are doing, and they did nothing. And Trump actually has gone in and he's doing something. He took out their nuclear program. He took out their bunkers. I think what he's doing is putting a stop to what Iran can do um, with nuclear arms. And so he's playing an active role. And this is something you look at, like the economists like Stephen Zihan, who I'm a huge listener. I'm a huge fan. I've read, his three big books. I thought The Accidental Superpower was a phenomenal book. I thought The End of the World is Only the Beginning, another tremendous book. I don't think he has everything right. I think when you look at the world after the United States, it's such a tough misnomer because the United States is not leaving. Our Navy is not going to get weaker. The U.S. military is not going to cease to exist. We have to fix our economy first. No great power has been able to continue while their economy is caving in. If you look at the British, if you look at the Romans, if you look at any of the great powers, their economy failed first. So he's trying to do what he can to reinstitute the U.S. economy, to revigorize, to reduce our $37 trillion debt. So we are going to have to reshape what the world looks like so that it can be a tenable thing for the United States. And I think that's what Trump is trying to do. And you don't have to vote for Trump to understand what he's trying to do. You don't have to believe in everything that he does. But I think when you look at some of these things, some of the stuff he's doing, I think will help make this a softer reshuffle, a softer reconnoiter of the world order. And I know you don't like that term, but when you look at it, what powers are truly influencing the world? How are they influencing the world? I think some of those things need to change.
My only cautionary tale on that is when you equate Iran and the nuclear program there and the resources in Venezuela and you put them in the same conversation, those two things are not the same in my view. Stopping the nuclear proliferation of a country that is hostile towards countries in its own region is one thing. Going into a country and kidnapping their president and bringing him here to face justice, I think those are two separate, I don't think they're parallel. And I would be, I'd be cautious about what our role was supposed to be in that and whether or not that was a good thing to affect another country's political not landscape, political structure.
Yeah.
I think what Trump is doing, and I think it is on purpose, is that you're narrowing the number of countries that have an effect on the global economy and the global morality and global how things are working in the world. NATO was meant to spread that out over multiple nations who had different views. They were geographically in different areas. What affected some countries didn't affect all of them, but there was sort of the UN had the ability to sort of um, mitigate some of the some of the action being taken, slow it down, and make sure that it was right for everybody, and that there weren't any unintended consequences of it. And I think when Trump goes in and militarily removes a leader out of, and I'm not saying that the end result didn't need to happen, but the method doesn't always justify the means, don't always justify the end. And I think that's a situation where now we have exposed ourselves to where what happens when another country says, hey, Cuba, Taiwan, Cuba, there are many countries out there that could say, hey, we heard from the people that they needed a change in regime, so we want the United States to come and help us out. I really want to ride the brakes on how much power we give to our leadership to say that we should be going into other countries and affecting how they govern, because that would not go well here if another country came in here and took our president.
No,
those are war.
No, we go to war.
Yeah. So why do we have the benefit of that action and other countries don't?
And I would say this, and I 100% agree with you. I understand exactly where you're coming from with that. I think the difference here is that there was an election and Maduro lost, and he did not leave. He consolidated power, and you had a duly elected individual down there that was not allowed to go in and take command. So the people spoke. The people of Venezuela did not want Maduro to continue to be their president. He did not have the backing of the people, and I really don't think that we would have left there without a single injury or significant injury. Any injury is bad and bad for the U.S. military, but I don't think we had anybody that was really seriously hurt in that operation. And I don't know if he would have had the backing of the people and of the military and of the complete governmental structure, that would have been the case. I mean, our military is fantastic, but that's unreal. I think that's the first time I've ever heard of that type of action happening with a limited number of troops without an injury. It's just incredible. And I think that tells you that the people did not back him. So I don't know. It's such an unusual case. And I think what complicates that case is the amount of oil that they have. It's the single largest oil reserves in the world. So it's enough to affect the global economy because oil is still where we get a lot.
I don't think we care about the global economy when we do what we did there. I think we're worried about the oil and where it goes and who controls it and how it affects our economy. I think if you're using that, part of the scorecard is how successful was the military operation in removing a dictator that was
top notch.
But I would argue, is that really what helps decide whether or not something was successful or not? I mean, yeah, we didn't have any injuries or casualties in our military. We were able to extract him. That's great training, and that's a send up to our military. But is that how we want to say we accomplished our goal, or didn't we? That makes me nervous.
What does the victory look like in 2 years? What do you see that victory look like 2 years from now? If this was a successful operation, not just in the military engagement, but for the Venezuelan people long term, what does that look like in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years?
I would say the 30,000-foot view that I have of what's going on is that in 2 years, the Venezuelan people will see virtually no change in their country, in their economy, in their day-to-day life. But the United States will benefit from the fact that we control the oil reserves and we had a say in who that oil is sold to.
Wait,
who gets to trade.
This is the exact opposite of the answer I thought you'd get. What would you consider to be a victory for the Venezuelan people? What would that look like? Because right now, the Venezuelan people are in poverty. They have all kinds of issues there. In 2 years, do you believe that we will work to make the Venezuelan people put in a better position?
I don't believe that's our goal.
I don't know if that's true. I don't think any of us really know.
Do you think we would have gone in and removed this dictator if those oil reserves were 1,000 miles east of where they are
No,
right now?
no, I don't. I think
Doesn't that?
no, but there's much more. Look at the number of times that we have gone in and used the U.S. military to affect change in regions throughout the world, and we've done it many times. We have taken out South American dictators before. We did it in Panama. We invaded Grenada. We invaded all these other countries. How are those countries doing now as opposed to when they were there with dictators? Grenada is a free people. Panama is doing much better. They control the Panama Canal. We gave it back to them. All these things have affected great changes in those countries, and their people are better off now than when they were under dictators in those countries. Is this not another case where yes, maybe oil had a play in those decisions, but can it still be a victory for the Venezuelan people to have somebody there that loves the people and want to have the people succeed and will put policies in place to make that happen?
I think that's putting lipstick on a pig, but that's probably a narrow view on my own take on that. I believe that the sole driver of this invasion was that the oil manufacturers and producers looked at the reserves that are there and went, have you looked at Venezuela? How much oil is under their soil? We need the opportunity. They're making deals with other countries. We need to control those reserves. Only way to control that was to inflict our force on them. And the way
And it wasn't just other countries; it was China. I mean, let's face it; they were the number one go-to, for cheap oil to help fuel their military buildup. And so there is a strategic victory for the United States in keeping China from having those reserves. I mean, I don't doubt that at all. I think
I
that's
don't doubt that
strategic
it's
victory.
strategic. I don't. Yeah, I can help you make the argument there. It's very strategic. My argument is that it's strictly strategic. It's not humanitarian. It's not anything to do with the people of Venezuela. It has to do with what they sit on.
So prior to the military incursion by the U.S. military, you have a leader who wins the Nobel Peace Prize. She should be the president of Venezuela. She offers, first of all, when she receives the Peace Prize, she gives it in spirit to Donald Trump, and then actually tries to give him the Nobel Peace Prize later. I mean, this is somebody that truly believed and was asking for the United States to help, was asking for the United States to step in. And she was the de facto leader of that country from the people's perspective. You
And
just had somebody who was not giving up
And
control.
she sold her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump for his assistance in putting her in power. Is it?
That is a take. That is a take. That is I don't see that as being what happened.
What possible reason would a person who knows the Nobel Committee says you can't infer or pass your Nobel Prize on to anybody else? What other motive would she have to
Sell that type of thing. It's just it's an incendiary type of thing. I think that she was looking. Words matter. Words matter. I believe that she was calling upon the United States to help, to step in, to use our military. Because right now, the U.S. military is an absolute power in the world. It's not just the size of the U.S. military, but when you look at the capabilities of the U.S. military, nobody moves troops the way we do. We have more ability to move tanks and soldiers and airmen around the world than the rest of the world combined. Just in the planes that we have that can actually handle that type of payload. Nobody has that ability. Nobody has the U.S. Navy. I think we have what, 27 aircraft carriers, something ridiculous like that, as much as the rest of the world combined, and our carriers are better than anybody else's. We have an incredible, and we've been fighting for these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these other places, and our military is toned. It's seasoned. It's a great military force. So yes, she sees that as a way to call upon the United States to help.
And no other world leader was pining for what they thought was rightfully theirs, that he stopped 8 world wars and he deserved that Nobel Prize and she got it. So
if you want to talk
that's
about Trump's ego, if you want to talk about Trump's,
I don't. Well, we don't need to.
No,
because there's a whole world out there that's talking about naming things and I'll pass the legislation to fund the railroad between Jersey and New York if you name the terminal and the airport after me. I mean, does the ego get any bigger than that? A 250-foot tall monument that looks like the Arch de Triomphe in downtown DC. Do we need another arch monument?
It'd look cool. I'm
glad it looks
I'm not
cool.
saying we didn't that we need that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that should be the next thing to go. I think it's funny the backlash that he had. Look, Kevin has a point. Our great producer would like to weigh in.
The White House came out and said that a large reason why they went to Venezuela was because of the oil.
Of course, but I don't think we denied that.
When you look into it a little bit further, by late 2025, about 80 to 85% of Venezuela's oil exports were going to China.
Yes,
directly or indirectly, largely via shadow routes.
correct. Because we had embargoes, exactly.
And independent Chinese refiners, they call teapots. Roughly 80% of the exports in a given month going to China. The rest were to Russia and Iran.
Okay, but my question is, if it's a free trade, free market, if that's the way the world is supposed to operate, who are we to say who they can sell their oil to? It's their oil. Those reserves are under their land. They should be able to, in a free market society, they should be able to sell their oil to whoever they want to.
I'm not saying sanctions happen. Do you believe that the World Trade Organization, that the UN, and the United States, as the great superpower that the United States is, should be able to sanction other countries because of their track history with human rights and all the things that are going on, that there should be sanctions placed on countries? And if the World Trade Organization has that power, and it's approved through that, and there are sanctions put on these countries, and they supersede them through illegal, as far as world trade goes, methods, then should any power be able to stop them from doing so? And if not, then it's not free trade, because then it's just a free-for-all.
To answer your question, from the 90s to the 1970s, U.S. companies like Standard Oil, Creole, and Gulf, now part of Chevron, they felt all of what Venezuela has.
They took it. And they took all of that, and those companies were just out everything. They didn't buy it out. They didn't just take eminent domain. They kicked out those companies, and they lost every bit of their investment. That's absolutely true. Now, I am an American citizen who believes that overall, we provide a lot of good to the world. When you look at the U.S. Navy, I believe it's the greatest power in the world that the world has ever seen to take people out of poverty. Globalism doesn't happen without the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Navy doing what it does. And I think this is another great example of the U.S. Navy doing something that is going to be good for them. I believe that. And I don't think China getting cheap oil is in the world's best interest. China has a goal in mind, and that is to become the not just economic, but military power in this world. And they're going to do everything they can in order to make that happen. And cheap Venezuelan, cheap Iranian oil, and cheap Russian oil is a huge piece in what they do, because they do not have the natural resources to feed the machine that it operates under. They don't. So they need partners like Venezuela, who was ardently anti-US, anti-West, anti-free trade. They needed to be stopped.
My only argument on that is I don't think we should operate under the guise that we are doing this humanitarian effort in Venezuela and we're there to help the people, when we know what the reason we're there for is, and that is to control the oil reserves. And I think what drives that is the oil industry. And I just spent the last 2 years of my life working in the oil industry, and certainly felt like I was in an important industry. But I don't think we should be allowed. I think those decisions getting made in boardrooms as far as what we're going to be doing for other countries and how we're going to affect their leadership and who runs their countries is dangerous.
I agree. If this was only made by Fortune 500 oil companies, if those were the only decisions being made, then I think this would be a cautionary tale. But when you look at the economic and the global political influences on these decisions, I think this decision is made by our joint chiefs. I think these decisions are made by our politicians. And I think they're made for the betterment of not just our country, but of society in general. I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe the world is a better place when Venezuelan oil is controlled by Venezuela and the Venezuelan government, but the duly elected Venezuelan government. And the only way that that could happen is by the U.S. military coming in and putting an end to the Maduro. I believe that.
I think we just traded dictators. I think we took theirs out and installed ours, or at least that it has that feel. And I suppose the proof is in the pudding, and
Yeah.
we'll have to see what happens over these next years and regimes and how they fix the government over there and make it more like ours. But I would say, as always, follow the money and who benefits from the fact that Maduro is out and we're on our way to controlling the oil pipeline out of Venezuela. Who benefits from that? Who's going to profit from it?
Well, I think that the oil companies are definitely going to be winners in this thing.
And who else?
Well, I think the U.S. government it is a beneficiary of this whole thing because this changes the Chinese ability to get dirt cheap oil to feed their machine. I think that it's a huge win on many fronts for the United States. There's no doubt about it. But I think this also could be a huge win for the Venezuelan people who can now benefit from their natural resources again, which they did for the longest time when they were aligned with the West. The Venezuelan people were in a much better position. Yes, US based oil companies did really well. European oil companies did very well with that. But there were also an awful lot of money paid that went back to the Venezuelan people during that time, and Venezuela was booming. And it wasn't until all of the industry was nationalized and became part of a dictatorial regime and all that money was stolen from them, that's when things got really bad in Venezuela. Democracy's not perfect. Capitalism isn't perfect, and the United States is not perfect. But I think it's way better off than what they had.
All right, fair enough. I mean, I'll withhold my thoughts on the rest of that until I see
Where this
for
goes.
myself how this pans out and who truly benefits from it. And I hope, truly, honestly, in my heart, I pray that my negative thoughts on this are misguided and that we're going to see great prosperity for a country that needs it and the people are going to benefit from it, and it's going to have that trickle down economy effect to where the people that are actually out there working in those oil fields and doing the labor are seeing the benefit from it. And when that happens, I'll gladly stand right here before you and admit that I stubbed my toe on that one.
And I hope my optimism is rewarded as well. I mean, I hope that is exactly what happens. That the Venezuelan people truly benefit from capitalism, from being able to have free elections again, and being able to have politicians that answer to the Venezuelan people, and that the oil companies give the money back and give the royalties that are necessary to fund the social programs and everything else that are going on in Venezuela. I hope that's the case as well.
I just don't want that to be what we paint on the banner, and that's how we justify, oh, now we're humanitarian. Our military are really, truly just humanitarians with a uniform, and we're going to go over there and solve these social issues over there. And that's the guys we're using for affecting change in their economy and who controls what. That's my fear. That's my takeaway from this is let's keep watching, and we need people that are brave enough that are in the political arena at this time to be able to be brave enough to make the right decisions and say the right things and back the right programs. And that's my hope.
Well, the next topic I think naturally goes to Iran. Iran is a country that we have never missed on. We have always been on the right side. We always seem to do the right thing with Iran, and that's sarcasm. We have completely botched that. We backed the Shah when the Shah was not backed by the people, and that put us in a very poor position. Because here, Iran is another country that you look at pictures of the Iranian people back in the 90s, and you had women that were going to college, and you had women that were driving, and you had beaches full of women that could wear a bathing suit if they wanted to, and stuff like that. And you see these pictures, and it looks like pictures from Miami. It looks like pictures from LA. It was a modern society, and it was booming. Again, phenomenal natural resources, not just the oil, but obviously it was a very oil-driven economy. But Iran was a great place to live. It was a moderate political state. It was not a religious state. It was just a good state to be a part of. And after the revolution, it became something else. and you can see, again, the poverty that's going on in a nation that's just steeped in natural resources. I would love to see a point where women had a stake in that country again, where it was a free society like it was back for a short period of time.
But how good are we at being a harbinger of what's good for other countries and installing leaders? What
Mixed
track
bag.
record?
Bag. We're a mixed bag.
When have we been successful?
Oh, okay, let's go to Europe. Let's look at Western Europe following World War II. You have a Marshall Plan. We came in and we dumped a tremendous amount of money, and we helped Italy rebuild. We helped Western Germany rebuild. I mean, Germany was a totalitarian state under Hitler. And boy, everybody likes to throw that name around right now. But let's look at what the United States did for Western Germany. Look at what Germany became. It became the second or third, depending on what year you were looking at. Japan was in there too, but it was one of the greatest economic powers in the world. Still is. And why? Because we rebuilt it. Because we helped put together a constitution that worked. We helped give power back to the people, and we rebuilt Germany. And we did that for all of Western Europe. And Western Europe has thrived. Look at what Western Europe's done. What happens after World War II if the United States doesn't do that? Look at Eastern Europe. Let's compare and contrast. Look at the economies of Romania and Poland and all of these other countries. Since Poland's come out from under the grip of the Soviet economy, it has flourished. Poland is now somebody we can lift up and say, look at the example that they are now that they're able. Now, I'm not saying that the United States did what Poland did. The Polish people did that. But look at compare and contrast those two. That's our track record. And it's not like it was that long. We rebuilt Europe.
But we can't afford to. Our stance now in the world echelon is that we aren't the rebuilders. You're going to have, all right, so now our plan has to be, if we're going to go around installing new leadership in other countries without these infrastructure investment that we're going to have to make in that, how do we succeed now? Because our role in that is going to be markedly different than what it was at the end of World War II, when we were shifting over from making tanks and airplanes and bombers and aircraft carriers to making domestic products and trying to bolster our own economy. How are we going to affect the world order and without having to go over there and invest it?
Because of the raw materials that they have, because of the resources they have, I think that a lot of that can be funded that way. And we'll see what happens. I don't want to say that that's exactly how it's going to go. I'd like to believe that's how it's going to go, because where we tried nation building in Afghanistan, it didn't work. Why? Because the education level wasn't there to just hand this political system over to people that weren't necessarily behind it. It's not how they grew up. It wasn't. We were trying to thrust democratic ideals onto people that had really never known democracy, and they didn't have the education background. They didn't have all these structures in place.
And they didn't have the cultural background.
No, they didn't culture. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, so that, I suppose that kind of comes back to the thought that's rolling around in my head is if we're ill prepared to install leaders because we don't understand the cultural basis for all the decisions that get made, and we're not good at that. We're not, because we keep thinking that we can go over there and make our system work over there, to a people who aren't interested in the Western.
But in Venezuela, they did. They knew democracy. They knew all that stuff. They had lived a great life before. I think that structure it's going to work better in Venezuela than it did in Afghanistan and Iraq, because their structure is different. They have better education.
Their religion is different.
They want democracy. And yes, they are, I think, primarily Catholic. Kevin, what is the predominant religious background in Venezuela? I want to say it's more of a Catholic dominated country. But while he's looking that up, I think their ideals.
Did you know you were going to work tonight?
I think they want democracy. I think that they have a passion for that, and I think in those cases we're far better off supporting political change in those countries because they desire it. I don't think if you would have just gone out and grabbed an average Afghani off the street and said, "Hey, what do you want this to look?" I don't think that they necessarily would agree. Yes, Kevin.
65 to 70% of Venezuelans are Catholic. The other 10 to 17% identify as Protestant or Christian.
So almost 90% Christian. That right there,
which aligns
with
more
Western.
closely with the Western way
Yes.
that government is run. So yeah, already we're 3 steps ahead or 4
Yes.
steps ahead.
And they had tasted democracy in the past, and I think that there is a desire for democracy. I think we've got a much better path in Venezuela than we did in Afghanistan. And why, when we pull out Afghanistan, did it just revert right back to what it was? Well, that's the only thing they've ever known.
The path of least resistance is always going to be,
Absolutely.
it's going to have a foothold.
Human nature. So let me rephrase the question. Should we have a military incursion? I don't think we do not want boots on the ground in Iran. I think it would be an absolute slaughter. I think we'd have a lot of American soldiers killed.
We have a case history that we can look back at and say
the Iran-Iraq war was a disaster. And Iran has a much better military, better surface-to-air missile defense. All those systems are much better than what Iraq had. I don't think it would go as smoothly and easily as our invasion of Iraq. And we had to do full mobilization in order to make that happen. It would be that and more in order to bring down Iran's military.
So who do the Saudis back in that region?
Well, the Saudis and Iran, it goes back to a whole Sunni. That's terrible. Sunnis and, come on, Kevin, what's the other? Sharia laws. They all ascribe to that. Yes. Sunnis and Shia. What is it? Look it up.
I think we're tipping our hand.
I think we are.
Here's why we shouldn't be.
and we're more well-read than probably a lot of people. But they ascribe to 2 different forms of Islam, and therefore I don't think you'd have the Saudis necessarily against us on this one. The Iranians and Saudis do not see eye to eye. I don't think most of, and when I say most, I don't think, from everything I've read, I don't believe that Islamic nations want Western militaries coming in and getting involved in their stuff.
And the only reason why I bring up the Saudis is because of the
Sunnis and Shia. You do that. Look at that.
The deep pockets that the Saudis have and the ability to buy into whatever market serves their best interest. They invest in the United States in our culture pretty readily in order to gain favor and in order to gain a foothold in the United States. They invest in things that we invest in.
Billions,
including our politicians and Live Golf.
Well, Live Golf is a great example. F1 is another great example. I mean, I think that's also a very smart move on their part. They know that their oil reserves are finite, just like all natural resources are. And I know that they know that they're not going to be able to do this forever. They pull a tremendous amount of oil out every year, every day, every hour. And that is not going to last forever. So they need an economy that goes beyond oil. And they've made themselves rich off of Saudi Aramco, and that they are one of the most powerful companies the world has ever known. And they have a great product that everybody needs. But it's not going to last forever. And so the Saudis are very smart to invest in a lot of other things. They want to see Saudi Arabia as a tourist destination. They want to see Saudi Arabia as
but they need a resource for the infrastructure.
Who could do that? That's a fair point. How is Live Golf going?
Well,
we have some guys coming back now, which is kind of unusual. You don't want them back.
No, they made their decision. They went for the money. I was a huge Phil Mickelson fan, and Brooks Koepka and DeChambeau, and they were fun for the sport.
Scheffler, didn't Scheffler go?
No, Scheffler's.
Oh, he stayed.
Yeah,
he's PGA.
Bubba Watson.
Bubba,
and they look a lot alike. They do. So some of the names in the PGA Tour went for the cash and and for different reasons. Some of them had gambling debts to pay off, so they had to make decisions that maybe they wouldn't have had to make. I mean, it's no secret that some of these golfers were heavily leveraged where it came to, I believe Phil Mickelson is one of them, who he tried out for the Mudhens back in the day, made it to day 2 or day 3 if I'm not mistaken. So like that guy, and when he chose to go to the Live Tour, for me, it was a black and white decision they were making. And if you went to the Live Tour and you went for the money, that's fine. I wish you well, but you are no longer. Well, that's harsh, but those sentiments.
How'd you feel about Ryder Cup this year? Because they brought back a lot of the Live golfers to be a part of the team. Do you think they should have been allowed to do that?
I hated the Ryder Cup this year.
Yeah,
only
you got
because
a plot scanned.
only because I thought the behavior of Americans at the Ryder Cup was deplorable. There was
The golfers or the fans?
the fans. I mean, the golfers, they got a little chippy, and I'm all for great competition. I mean, the Ryder Cup. You and I went to the Buick Open up in Detroit, and we saw what a lively crowd could be, and some of the players embraced it, and they owned it, and they were a part of it, and they were getting the crowd going. And some were like, "Is this really how we want to do this?"
So the Buick Open is based in Flint, Michigan. It was at Warwick Hills, a very historic club there in Flint, and you had a situation where Buick, which was the major sponsor for Tiger Woods, and this was kind of his tournament. He got all the biggest golfer names to come because that was a good thing for him because it was Buick and that was his big sponsor. So you had all the major golfers go, and when all the tickets didn't sell, GM bought the remainder of the tickets and they gave them out to their plant employees, of which at the time I think there was like 7 General Motors plants in Flint, Michigan. I think there may be 3 or 4 now, and we'll get to that American manufacturing piece because that is something I want to touch on this time. But so you had a lot of individuals there that maybe had never gone to a PGA, where you got somebody out there with a little sign that says quiet, and they raised that sign and all the talking went, and it was just dead silence so that the golfer would concentrate on that putt or that chip or something like that. And you had these guys that they were used to going to tailgate parties for Michigan Wolverine games and the Detroit Lion games and the Michigan State Spartan games, and these guys were just rowdy. And there was a beer tent right behind the hole that we were sitting on, which is 16. The beautiful par 3 over the pond. It's a great hole, and it was so much fun to watch. These guys would go back there and get these big. It was like a big gulp. It was like a 7-Eleven, a big gulp full of beer, and they would drink these, and they would just drop the new one into the last one. And some of the guys had like 10 of these cups, and they were hammered, and they were so loud and obnoxious. And these guys would come out, these 80-year-old men with these little, please be quiet signs, and they would raise them up. They were screaming to shove those things up their rear end and all that stuff. It was hysterical to sit back and watch it. And yeah, some of the golfers were furious. It was fun.
Well,
it was fun for us to sit back and watch.
They had to stop serving beer when the leaders hit like maybe at the turn, so that the back 9 could be played with some semblance of order.
Do you remember Hideki Matsui coming off? He had birdied. He knocked his wedge onto the green, and he was probably maybe 5-6 feet from the cup. And then and he walks up, and the crowd just going nuts, and he taps it in for a birdie, and everybody was really excited as he walked off. There must have been, I mean, a huge crowd that was going nuts. But there was a guy that stepped up, and he looked to be about 6'8" and all of 450, 500. He was a gigantic man, and he bear hugged this poor tiny golfer.
Yeah.
And it was the look on that poor golfer's face. He looked like
he wasn't sure if he was going to get hugged or
crushed.
Yeah.
Well, at that point, I think the PGA was like, all right, we gotta calm things down a little bit here. And I think that's when they went to the
well,
beer
and
tent.
I think my view of the Live Tour is that it took those elements of golf and amplified them. So music out on the course, and the players could wear shorts, and I'm not a stuffed shirt PGA fan. I played golf since I was 4 years old until about 10 years ago, when I just couldn't play anymore. And my love for the game of golf is steep. It's something I shared with our dad.
Yes. Dick McDonald.
Going to the Memorial Tournament down in Columbus, Jack's tournament with our dad. That was the last time the 3 of us went to a golf tournament together. Golf is near and dear to my heart. And the Live Tour is everything that's wrong with golf. That's a strong opinion, but I think it ruined, for me, the sport. It made it about the Saudi money. It made it about big purses and appearance, paying players just to come and show up to the tournament to play, instead of having to play in on Thursday and Friday in order to make it for the weekend. And all of those elements, when you start stacking them up, it led to a game that, for me, isn't what golf is. And I think you're starting to see people who came for the show and saw what was going on and experienced what they saw, like a weekend at the Buick Open in Flint, and they went, okay, that was fun, but when do we get back to PGA Tour etiquette and golf decorum and the Live Tour does not have that.
Did the Waste Management Open in Phoenix, did that have anything to do with that subtle change as well?
I'm sure, that's another one. I mean, the Buick, I remember the reporters from Detroit News talking about the tournament on the days that we went, and they would talk about the rowdy crowds.
I got the Flint Journal the next day, and there were golfers saying, "I will never come back to Flint, Michigan. I'm done with this. This is the last
They would
time."
take that week off and not play golf because of what was going on.
And it was a big purse.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Buick Open, Buick being a title sponsor, and they were a PGA sponsor at the same time. So,
and there was a one of the big four like the week after or 2 weeks after that too. So it was a warm up tournament before the PGA Championship. I want to say it was the PGA, but it was one of them. And it was a major. So it was interesting.
So I'm not a Live Back fan. Once you've made that determination, stay there. Make your money, because that's clearly what motivated you to make that decision. And the players that stayed on the PGA Tour, Scheffler and those guys, now you're going to penalize them because these guys made $100 and $200 and $300 million by going over to the Live Tour. Now they're going to come back because all of the big majors, the ones that you want your legacy to be built on, are part of the PGA Tour. They want the best of both worlds. Tough. You made the money decision. You're going to have to stick with that. But we allowed them to come back and play at the Masters and play at the U.S. Open and the PGA Tour. I thought, for having a bunch of their players pretty much thumb their nose at the PGA and their rules and how they wanted to do things, and went to this other tour, allowed them to come back and play the majors because it was still part of the game. I think that was big of them. I don't think it was in their best interest. It didn't serve them, but they allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
So if you're either a Live player or you're a PGA player, in my book, and I don't see anything in the future that would cause me to change my mind on that. And like I said, I am a golf fan. I love playing golf since I was just a little kid, and the game changed, and it was in large part to the Live Tour and what they did.
Yeah,
it wasn't good.
I'm in complete agreement. So I want to get back to the manufacturing piece, because we talked about that a little bit, and one of the big pushes from this administration is to homeshore manufacturing back to the United States. Coming from Toledo, Ohio, and coming from Ohio, which was always a huge manufacturing base in the United States. When you look at some of the plants around where we're at right now, they were the plants that made the Liberator bomber and some of these, the Jeeps, which just stunned the Germans, during that war, that so much of the American military was mechanized, and they were still pulling a lot of their stuff with horses. They had great tanks and everything like that, but nowhere near the numbers of the Shermans.
Built bombers at the Hydromatic plant on Wes's Road.
Absolutely. And they built Jeeps at Overland, and they just couldn't believe that they would take out one of those American Jeeps and the Americans could just replace it like the next day. There would be 10 more Jeeps where that one was blown up. And they treated them almost disposable. And it was like a court-martial offense not to get that mechanized piece of equipment back up and running for the Germans. And they were just blown away by American manufacturing. And we've lost that. And to be a part of that decay throughout most of my career, just watching plant after plant after plant, that I would go in and be a part of it and take part in the upkeep of these facilities, and to watch them close their doors and the equipment packaged up and shipped to China was painful for me during most of my career. And now we're to the point where we're looking at bringing manufacturing back to the United States. And I know that there's people that don't think it's happening fast enough and the numbers aren't there yet and stuff like that.
Well, there was a report today. Now, I hate to step on your thought.
No. This is exactly what we're here for.
One of Trump's biggest supporters owned a brass plant in Ohio that made brass instruments, musical instruments. And he's a Trump supporter, and Donald Trump run on bringing this manufacturing back, who is now closing his plant in Ohio and shipping those jobs over to mainland China. It's like, okay, it's not happening fast enough. We haven't even stopped the flow yet. It's not that we haven't turned it around. We haven't stopped the migration yet.
And I would disagree with that, only because when you look at the plants that are going in right now, the semiconductor plants, the fact that we have steel plants that are being built, the fact that we have data centers going in, the fact that, and data centers don't make stuff. So I get that. But when you look at the manufacturing output of the United States and what it's going to look like in coming years, there is a lot of manufacturing that's moving back. Now, not every industry is going to be the same, and not everything. Trump's only been in office for what? How many months? 6, 7?
I don't know, a year.
A little over a year. I'm sorry. You're right. You're a year and 2 months. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but it is happening. We do have manufacturing jobs coming back to the United States. And when you look at shipbuilding and you look at some of these huge industries that we had just given away, they are coming back. And I believe they will be back. And I think it's critical for the long-term economy of the United States that we have manufacturing back in the United States. And for us to just give that away to China so that they could build up this military that they're now wanting to use against us and against our allies is something that had to change. It had to change.
You're not going to get an argument out of it. I'm a union electrician for 40 years, and I'm a union electrician at a school now, and manufacturing and jobs are important to me, not only because it bolsters the economy, but I think it improves your lifestyle. It gives you purpose in your life. I think it builds stronger families when people are working and they can afford to, and
retirements.
Well, yeah, at some point, even at 63 years old, retirement for me is down the road a bit. But yeah, I mean, the fabric of our nation is built on manufacturing, and anything that we can do to get back to that, well, not any, because my point is, it's not an all or nothing. It's not a sum total, or it has to be all or nothing. I just want to make sure that in getting back to that, bringing those jobs back, that we're doing it not at the behest or at the cost of humanitarian or social justice at the same time. My fear is that I read an article today from a pastor in Minnesota. I don't know if we're allowed to use names, but
I think we can. They can look him up as long as you're referencing it.
Yeah. And now I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, he's a pastor, retired, but he's a vocal opponent of this administration. And part of his argument today in today's post was that the lesser of two evils is a crappy argument. That we elected this guy because he was the lesser of two evils. Well, no. His point was: are the lesser evils, are they still good for the American human, or not even American humans in general? Are the social programs, are the injustices, are the programs that we're funding helping people, improving life, or are we selling that out in order to gain something in a different arena? I'm not making the pun entirely.
No, I think you're making it very well. When I look at that, though, and I agree, I think he makes a very good point. I think I am guilty sometimes of backing a lot of what Trump does because I believe in some of these things that he's doing so passionately. And I think I need to be checked on some of those things. At the same time, there's some good passages that talk about the fact that God puts our leaders in place and that we are to support our leaders. And so I'm going to do that. I supported Biden. I did not vote for Biden, but I supported him. He was the president of the United States. I didn't agree with everything he did. Same with Obama. I really saw Obama as somebody that could, because of who he was and what he represented, he gave hope that I could be president too, to an entire race of people that had never had a black president before. And I think that's awesome. At the same time, I think he was divisive in his presidency and didn't do a lot to bring people together. And that was disappointing. But I supported him. He was still my president. And I think that's the case with Trump. Do I agree with everything Trump does? No. Do I wish that he would do things in a more pleasant manner, in a more political manner? No, that's not who he is. So why I don't want to just excuse everything that he does, I got to take those things that he's doing that benefit the American people and the American economy. And with that, I think because of who we are in the world, I think that will long-term benefit the world. And I want to support him in those efforts. And this is one of those things. I think strengthening the American economy and having manufacturing, especially critical manufacturing, especially things like steel and shipbuilding, those types of things, that we had lost that to globalism. globalism was not a good thing for the American economy. We did not benefit as a nation from globalism. We didn't. We gave that away to everybody else to strengthen everybody else. China went from a backwater, fifth world economy to the second best economy in the world because on the backs of the American taxpayer. They did. And I think that there comes a point where a politician needs to eat the crap pie and do what it takes to put an end to that. And that is something Trump is doing. And I want to see that continue. I want Apple to pull those gigantic plants out of China and move. And now, are we going to be able to make iPhones in the United States? No, I don't think we have. I don't think we have enough people to man those types of facilities. And I also think that the iPhone, if it was built in the United States, would probably cost us, instead of $700, $1,700. I think the cost would be untenable. But there is a lot of manufacturing that come back to the United States.
I love you like a brother.
And I love you.
I think this is where you and I
differ the most.
Because I don't want to disagree with you.
But disagree.
I
love that we can disagree and still love each